proceeds to ignore her and talk to her for the majority of the book. So she falls for what exactly? The whole book, he was just like, touch her and you die, he's mine, he's mine, he's mine. And it could get a bit one note, like, what other emotions do you have, sir? To save your life and you're still running your mouth about it? To actively seek out accountants as a type. Hey guys, I am Colleen and I'm a person. I like to read and I like to write, but I do whatever on this channel. If you can hear the fan, it's on and it'll stay on. I am so sorry. But today I thought we could get back into the bookish content. I did start reading again. It's kind of a slow start, so you're gonna have to excuse me because I don't have a big like recent reads list for you guys today. I read 4 books in honor of Twilight season. I thought I would get into some vampire / fated mates trope type books, and I read a few. Let's get into it. The first book that I read is Fated Mates and When to Keep Them. I will put the picture up because I can't remember the author's name right now off the top of my head. This one it wasn't short, but it felt that way. I have notes, by the way. This is a vampire mafia boss, and he falls in love with his assistant. Yeah, who is human. So it's a vampire human relationship thing, and it's also a fated mates trope. The mains are both male leads, and it's very it's a light plot. The progression, the conflict, it's all light. I mean, not to say that I didn't enjoy it. I thought that both the mains, Noelle and Fernando, they were very sweet, almost like a sickly kind of sweet, but I still found it adorable. But on the flip side, I thought that everything sort of went well for the MC, too well. Everything went his way. Does that make sense? For me, when I read it, it's like a very standard manhwa trope. There's an obscene amount of debt, and then there's a super rich guy who solves all the problems. That kind of thing. What's even more funny is that the love interest's name is even Lombardi, which is the main of a very famous historical manhwa, I Shall Master This Family, that I have been raving about forever. One of my favorite things about this book is the opener. The first chapter is kind of a flashback to when the love interest, the vampire guy, was still human, and the opener was so well written and so interesting. It hooks you right from the off because he wakes up inside his grave. He was buried alive, and it was like the olden times where there's supposed to be a bell in the graveyard in case you were buried alive, and that's what happened to him. And I thought that was just really Halloween-y, ooky spooky vibes, which I am here for. I may do a cozy fall autumn reads list next time if I get around to it. Overall, I did enjoy the book. It's just that everything went too smoothly, in my opinion, for our mains. But the romance, I really liked it. Everyone passing this street is just so freaking... The second book that I read is called Taste of Fate. I will put it up again. Why can't I remember the author's name right now? The premise is basically a human is sacrificed as a blood pet to a vampire clan, and she turns out to be a fated mate of the vampire that she is meant to be a blood pet to. Was that a good, a concise way of putting it? I'm pretty sure there's a more concise way of putting this, but yeah. The mains Octavia and Cyan. First point for this book, again, spoilers, since it is a fantasy book, there's a lot of obligatory info dump-ish explanation. I felt like in the name of world building, there were a lot of explanation heavy chapters, some that didn't necessarily move the story forward, if that makes sense. I thought that it could have been edited a little bit more to strip down some of that unnecessary stuff. Next point, I thought that the progression of the story was a bit off. Something about it felt off to me, like how the relationship building went and how the conflicts arose and how they were solved. The key events were there, but their placement was a bit off to me. That's just my opinion. My next point is going to be like a bit specific to the story, so if you don't want to hear it, like, cover your ears or something, spoiler alert. The main character, Octavia, she has a best friend who's a bit of a weakling. She's called Amy. And Octavia basically devotes her life to protecting this person. Amy was kind of ungrateful throughout the series for me. For example, like, Octavia sacrificed herself, and then she was being a bitch about it. Like, she said she didn't want to be saved. The only reason that you can say this and that and all these things about your current position, the only reason you can even have a stand and have a perspective is because this person keeps saving your life. She keeps giving you choices, and then she's being so ungrateful. And I don't know, to save your life and you're still running your mouth about it. I don't know. It's not a very best friend-esque behavior, and I don't know. I didn't like it. It's not for me. With regards to the romance, I liked that Octavia advocated for herself a lot of the time, most of the time, typically. But in that third act fight, I thought that the guy was forgiven too quickly. Cyan was forgiven too quickly after some like frou-frou heart-to-heart sort of a thing. It was so like patronizing, and I even found myself like skimming some of the parts where they were blowing smoke. I just couldn't. There was so much like frou-frou BS. I don't know, maybe I'm just too old for that kind of heart-to-heart. The guy was forgiven too quickly, but the heart-to-heart conversation was like too long. I mean, where is the grovel? Overall, it was a bit, like, it was cute, but nothing beyond lukewarm. Like, there was something about how the characters were written that kept me from connecting with their emotions, if that makes sense. Regarding the romance between Octavia and Cyan, I listen. I don't know if this was what was intended, but how it came off to me is that, like, Cyan said a few kind words to her, gave her a bunch of stuff for, like, winemaking, and then proceeds to ignore her and talk to her for the majority of the book. So she falls for what exactly? You know how a lot of the book community right now is discussing how we're glorifying toxic love interests to the point where romance isn't romantic anymore. There's definitely been a conversation about that recently, and yeah, maybe this is an example of that. I feel like, in my personal opinion, ratings wise, I didn't really feel this book, but I finished it, so that's not nothing, I guess. Can you hear like the jackhammering and the whatever it is they're building next door, maybe a roller coaster or something, but I can hear so many things. The next book that I read is The Witch's Wolf. This book, it has a sort of a, not really, but kind of, a post-apocalyptic setting. Basically, they're in this human utopia in the middle of, like, as the press release went, like, radiation-filled middle of nowhere, and their colony is the only safe haven. The premise is there are two girls who discover that they're not exactly human, so basically they can't stay in the community and they have to get out because they're not purely human. And then once they escape, they discover that there is more to the outside world than what the colony, the community led them to believe. One of the things that I loved about this book is there was an emphasis that this human utopia was like scientific, information based, like not a hair out of place, perfection, like rigid and cold, kind of a place. And I like that the story slowly stripped that away as the two girls, as sisters, went out of the community. Even like the visual writing of the visual cues, there was like so much nature, and it wasn't as super perfect. There was some chaos. There was like a lot of, it was messy outside, but it had a beauty to it. There was warmth to it, the complete opposite of what it was like in that box, in that community. And I liked that about this book because there was magic and all the things that made life beautiful and messy was out there. And there's such like complete opposites, and I like that it began from here, from like cold and rigid and, stiff, to a warmer, more magical world. One of my not so good points about the book is at the beginning, it takes 3 chapters to fully get out of the city. They already know that they have to leave, and it takes 3 chapters to like get everything together. I don't know what was happening with those 3 chapters. Like, one of my very points about this book is that it starts at a crawl and it sort of proceeds to a sprint, which is not like my cup of tea pacing wise. A good point about this book is that I thought the villain was great. The main villain of this story is the alpha of the pack. His name is Apollo. The writing for him, for this character, is complex and not just evil without reason sort of a person. He was like multifaceted, if that makes sense, because you could kind of sympathize with him at times. He was kind of dealt a bad hand in life. He had a few tragedies happen to him, and the writing for this character kind of shows you how much of a slippery slope it is, how well you come out of something like bad experiences depending on how you deal with them and react to them and your course of action when something bad happens to you. And yeah, I think it's something that every person, every reader can relate to. Another thing about this villain that I liked is that I couldn't actually predict whether he would make it or not. Usually it's apparent to me whether like a bad guy would make it to the end or not. If you want to find out, read it. While I did love the villain, there's a secondary villain in the story, the Beta. There was some implications that he was kind of poisoning the thoughts of Apollo and like feeding him all this negativity, and I would have liked a bit more of an explanation as to his motive and like how much of Apollo's ruin was due to the things that he was like feeding. I thought he was killed so easily and so meaninglessly, in the book. I just thought it was a wasted opportunity. As a main character, I really liked Sage. She's a like warrior, protective type of person. She had like boundaries and a strong belief system. I like that she didn't immediately fold to the love interest's shtick. As for the ML, what was his name again? Maddox. If a possessive growl was personified, it would be Maddox. I understand that this is a fated mate situation. Maddox, like, affection and devotion to Sage, like, it was cute, it was adorable. I like that he was all about her, but it could get a bit one note at times, because he literally was, the whole book, he was just like, touch her and you die, he's mine, he's mine, he's mine. And it could get a bit one note, like, what other emotions do you have, sir? He was just like a giant growl. Another thing about it is his love for Sage started very instantaneously, and it was so over the top that there was a part of me that was questioning how genuine it was. Maybe like tone it down a bit. My next point is neither here nor there. I felt like in this town, this like wolf territory town, I felt that the key characters were a bit isolated, but I'm not sure if this is intended. There was some explanations about the town not being as it was before. It wasn't as glorious as it was before. It's a bit run down now. I'll give it that. But as I was reading, I just kept picturing like a town meeting with 25 people, like a classroom worth of people for a whole town meeting, and I just couldn't get it off of my head. It's just like a silly hee hee ha ha thing. The final act of this book I felt was a bit haphazard for how great the build up was. I felt like from the restaurant opening to the alpha challenge scene in the book, it was a bit of a sprint. I felt like everything was slowly fizzling out. I felt like everything was becoming anticlimactic and super quick and glossed over, and yeah. Overall, I still enjoyed the book, don't get me wrong. There were parts of it that I really, really enjoyed and really, really liked and was impressed by. But did the book live up to its full potential? I don't think so. It was an engaging read, nonetheless. The last book that I read is a standalone, but kind of part of a series as well. It's called My Vampire Plus One. It's by Jenna Levine. I read My Roommate is a Vampire by the same author a while back, and this is part of the same universe. This is Reginald's story. When I read My Roommate is a Vampire, that whole time I was reading it, I was picturing Reginald as like an old guy, like a Peter Pettigrew sort of a guy. And I don't know why I pictured that. When he got his own book, I discovered that he was like the typical hot Twilight vampire. And apologies for assuming that he was anything but. I don't know, maybe it's the name Reginald, which I guess it's part of the charm of the book. This book is actually rom-com. This is so rom-com, equal parts romance and comedy. A lot of rom-com books now are bombing you with romance and severely lack in the comedy department, but this is not. And even the first book in the series was so funny as well, but this is even more funny. Reginald is sort of a goofy character. He dresses funny. He's not like a cool macho. I mean, he was hot, obviously, but he dressed funny. He was a glockenspiel player. Did I say that right? Why could I not say that? And a lot of the language between Frederick and Reginald was so funny, especially when they were referencing a moment in their shared, in like their past, because they've been friends for like a few hundred years. I thought it was so funny. The phrasing of their dialogue was so funny and so formal in a way, but also clueless. The spiel is an accountant and a vampire fake date so that she can take him to a relative's wedding, which we've seen that a lot. It's not exactly like a novel concept. There's this part where Reginald said, "I've always had a thing for accountants, and let me tell you, it sent me." That is not a thing that comes out of a person's mouth. There's nothing wrong with being an accountant. People get with people who happen to be accountants, and yeah, it's a normal thing. Obviously, it's a good thing, but to actively seek out accountants as a type, while accountants are great, like to actively, exclusively seek them out as your type. Maybe it's kind of like when some people say they only date tall people, or I don't know, but yeah, a profession. It's the funniest thing ever. There was a part where he was meeting her parents and he started like a nonsensical spiel about being a carnival worker, and I almost died. I had to stop for a sec. I want to laugh now just because I'm remembering it. But yeah, it was so cringy and so funny at the same time that I had to stop and collect myself because I did not know where it was going. And yeah, I really felt that tension. Like, what is he gonna do and how is he gonna mess this up? And yeah, that's the kind of thing, like, some things happened to the characters that are goofy and they're not always like put together cool, but it's part of the book's charm. I don't know how the author managed to keep the same energy and make it even better from the first book to the sequel, because usually sequels are letdowns. Not always, but yeah, history would suggest that the second book is never as good as the first book, but not with this one. Even the villains were not like too serious. They were goofy, clumsy type of villains, not really ones that you would take seriously. They were late to the final showdown because of downtown traffic, and they were defeated through the power of the IRS, which is not a thing that I thought I would ever read in a romance book. Rom-coms are supposed to be feel good. This is a feel good book. I highly recommend if you just want to really laugh out loud while you are reading. Plot overall is very, very light. The intimate scenes are better than the first book. Still very much mild, but it was better communicated than the first book. Yeah, just silly, endearing characters as opposed to stoic, brooding, the typical vampire stereotype. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to more of the author's work. So that was it. Only read 4 books, which is good because since they're all kind of in the same vein, like Fated Maid's vampire, if I had read 10 books, I would have definitely mixed them up and not remembered which was which. I will definitely be continuing cozy fall, as I said, walk through a cemetery, kind of ooky spooky vibes, paranormal, werewolves, vampires. It's Halloween, almost. And I will definitely be continuing in that path of TBRs. I will let you know if I find any good ones. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Sorry if it was like noisy as but yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. Like, comment, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.